Assalamu alaikum guys. In this video we'll learn how to build a dynamic properties model like in Notion. So if you go to Notion and create a task here, there is something called add property, and if we select on it, we can select the data type of property we want to use, and we can assign a name for it, for example like this, and let's say user, and we can also assign a value for this. We can say Muhammad. Right. Also, we can create a new properties with type date, right? And we can say new date. Its type is date, right? And the default value is empty, and we can fill this value as you can see here. So how can we do it using Laravel and Alpine JS? So first of all, as you can see here, I built something like this, and we can select the model, right? And here's our property name. So the default value will be the text or the type name. And for example, I can say here username, and we can assign a value here, for example, Ahmed, right? When I click submit, it's saved. If I go to my database and refresh, here is the properties table, name is username, and its value is Ahmed, right? So what I did, first of all, I have created this types model, right? Or type model here with predefined types, for example, text, email, URL, and so on, right? And here we have our input type for these inputs, as we can see here. So if I back and click inspect, I will click text. If we click on inspect for this here, as you can see, its type is text. If I change it to email, yes, actually it's a fix on this type. So if I back here and select this type, here is our type is email. If I back and select a URL, if you notice here, type is URL, right? According to this column. And here we have some validation rules while inserting values, and all of them, as we can see, is nullable. So maybe we can create a property and we may assign a value later, right? And here for select or drop box or drop menu, we have this column called a selectable. So it may have multiple options, and this is multiple for having multiple values. And on other side, in my properties table, I have the type, which is represents the data type here, and also the name of property, the value of it, and allowed values for selecting or options that will be selected, right? So here, if we back again and refresh, I will select, right? Type is select, and I will say, for example, status, right? And pending, separated by comma, done, and in progress, right? Now, as you can see here, it's dynamic. If we add another one here, one or test, rest, okay, it will be added automatically, right? And I will select a value here. Now submit, it's added back to our database, refresh, here's our status. The value is in progress as we selected, and here is the allowed values or options to be selected, right? So here is in our code base, in our properties, let's change it to play it here. First of all, our entry point is this root. So using properties blade, I am attaching the types that we have in our database in this table here, and in our properties blade, our first input here is select, right? And I am looping for them. It's normal way, very basic thing here. The value is the type ID, and also I'm displaying the name, and I am binding them using X model selected type ID. If we back here, this selected type ID, and each time this selected type ID changed, here I am watching it, and if it changed, I am firing this select type to assign this select type property here for the object of the type, and then I am setting the property name according to the selected type here, right? So if we continue, and I am checking here, once a type has been selected, I am starting displaying the input or generating a new input for this property name, and I am binding it here. It's called property name, and its name also called name, because I will save it in our properties table here, right? And here is what I do in this line. So first of all, I will select a type, then it will generate this type. The default name of this property is a type name. Also, as you can see here, property name, right? And then I am checking also for the same thing here, if it's selectable or the data type will be select. I am generating two inputs here. The first one is allowed values. If we select here, if we back it to our database, this type select is selectable true one here. As we can see, the same thing, right? I'm generating an input called allowed values for values which will be allowed, right? Will be separated by commas, as we can see here, and I am attaching it to or binding it to values property. So if I back here again for values, right? And I am watching it also using watch here. If values changed, this input, right? Here, 1, 2, 3. These values will be generated or separated and converted to array automatically using this set allowed values method using split method. This is the same like this here, like explode in PHP or Tinker. I will show it here, explode. For example, here separate by comma, 1, 2, 3. I am doing the same thing here using this line. So once the values here is changed in this input, it will generate an array called allowed values here using set allowed values method, right? So let's continue here, and its name is allowed values, as we can see here, and it's binding two values. And then I am generating the normal property value to select the value here. There is an exception, specific logic, edge case for select inputs here, and I am looping around allowed values, the array that is generated from this set allowed values method by watching the values attribute here, right? After looping around them here, I am displaying values, and here is also our name of this select input, right? I setting name, I am using both split and Alpine, by the way, and then I am checking if it's a normal input, not selectable, like these values, text, URL, email, and so on here, like these values. I will say the type of this input will be input type here, this value, right? And the placeholder will be also the property name that we set when selecting the type ID, or we're setting this input here, this one, right? And also last thing here, I'm using name value, and then in the end here's our submit button. So how I save these values here? First of all, I have this controller and I am not duplicating the values or properties. So I'm using update or create for name of properties. Here is our form request. I have this type validation rules, right? And inside prepare for validation, before entering to this rules method, I am defining and I'm saying type find or fail the type ID that we will send here, this type ID from this value select, right? And the name of property and the value here I am assigning to this validation rules. So I am taking this value validation rules from our database because it's dynamic and different for each type, right? And then I am formatting it here using array filter, and I start validating. So here for the video time, I have created this method for displaying errors. So first of all, I will die and dump this value here. So dd, I will say validation rules for this type ID, right? So I will select here a text and I will leave it empty. As you can see, the validation rule here for this type ID 1 is sometimes nullable. Let's back and see. And here is our logic. How does it work? ID 1, and here's our validation rules. Okay. Then I am assigning this value here to our variable that I created, right? And also I am checking if we have allowed values or multiple options, I am parsing them and converting them to array here. If not, I am setting them as null because its default value is null. So if I back here and I will select, I will say gender, male, female, right? And I will select the default value here is female, for example, and let's say dd this input allowed values, right? And I will send the data here. As you can see, it's a string, right? And here what I'm using explode here, right? I will dump this line dd here, send again, and now it's converted to array by separating commas. And if not, here back and select another type, text for example, it will be an empty array. And if it's empty, I will convert it to null. So if I continue here and I will say dd this all, and I will remove it from here. Now continue. As you can see, allowed values is null, and here is our other input values, right? So if I remove it, continue and save, it's saved. And now refresh. Here our new input or properties has been added successfully. If we go to our seeders here, for our predefined seeders, I am using, as you can see, name and input type, and here is our validation rule using JSON encode. And if we go to models, here our type model has many properties because we have type ID here inside our properties table. And if we go to here our property, I am casting the allowed values as array, so no need to use JSON encode or decode while saving or updating, right? And there's also our migrations file for types table and properties. Very easy, name and input type validation as JSON because I am saving arrays. Boolean for is selectable and is multiple values, and the same thing also for properties table. As we can see here, foreign ID relation for the types table, and the string is name, and allowed values for options, and also value and or are null to be flexible, right? I will attach this commit in the description to see the code and may modify it. If you found it useful, support me by clicking on like, share and subscribe. See you in next videos.